Chapter 9, Family, Part 1. Twilight Sparkle couldn't distinguish between dreams and reality. One moment, she was being eaten alive. She experienced her body being chewed up by the scorpion demon's maw. It started with her forehooves, grinding away the keratin until she felt the burning sensation of her hooves being sawed into pieces. Her head was next, and even though she should be dead, she felt her neck and torso follow in a wave of pain. The next moment, hooves held her down while her body convulsed. She heard her friends' voices in her ears, telling her not to give up, telling her that she was going to be okay. But she didn't believe them. She had watched them all die, over and over, one after another, while she walked down the winding path she had chosen. Sometimes the Black Knight would kill them. Sometimes the demon would kill her, and she would watch as it slowly bore down on her friends and finished them. When it was done with her companions, it would move on to the town. The last thing it ate was the 3 little fillies. Paradoxically, at the same time, they were there beside her. At least one glowing light in the darkness remained at her side through it all. Their voices were always with her, calm and soothing. She wanted to know why pain filled every moment of her existence, and why she was still alive. She should be dead. The scorpion demon had eaten her.
No. I killed it. It's dead, and I'm alive.
It came back to her then, the last reserve of strength that had risen to her aid when she needed it most. She remembered driving the unfamiliar sword into its black heart, and she knew those moments were real.
Then why is it still here?
It loomed before her, an ethereal plague on her soul. Still, it tried to kill her, impaling her with its tail, ravaging her body with its claws, eating her again and again. But no matter what it tried, she would not die. No matter how much pain it caused her, she continued to breathe, and her heart continued to beat.
I'm alive because I'm stronger than it is,
she realized. At first, she had run, galloping into the darkness away from it. It would always catch her. Eventually, she had given up. The pain was inevitable anyway. Over and over again, she let it attack her, destroy her, and tear her limb from limb, waiting for death to finally take her. She was tired of waiting to die. She was tired of seeing her friends die. She was tired of pain.
Enough!
She roared. She lashed out at the monster as it bore down on her, and an aura of shadow wrapped around it. With surprising ease, she lifted it aloft. It floated above her, its many limbs spread out. She focused her fury, and in the blink of an eye, she crushed the massive, mindless creature into a black ball smaller than a grain of sand. Finally, her pain went away, and she drew an easy, peaceful breath of sweet air. Twilight opened her eyes. Rafters crisscrossed above her, holding up the roof above her head, and she faintly heard the pitter-patter of raindrops on the shingles. She swallowed dryly. Her mouth tasted like cotton. She felt soft linen sheets around her, and a comfortable mattress beneath her.
Food,
Twilight thought. An empty pit burned with hunger in her belly, and she longed to fill it. She glanced to the side and saw Fluttershy and Angel dozing on a chair beside her bed, next to a shuttered window. She rolled to the edge of the mattress and extended her hooves to the floor. Her legs crumpled beneath her, and her chin hit the wooden floorboards with a crack, pincering her tongue between her teeth. In an instant, Fluttershy was beside her, gently caressing her back with a hoof.
Oh, thank goodness! You're awake!
Fluttershy said. Twilight whimpered pitifully as tears clouded her vision. She gathered her hooves beneath her, trying to rise, and her muscles trembled with weakness. A fey dragon-sized purple smudge rushed over to her from around the foot of the bed. "She's awake!" Spike cried.
That was a nasty spill you took, Twilight,
Fluttershy said soothingly, as she pressed Twilight back down to the floor.
You shouldn't be trying to stand just yet. Don't you worry. We'll have you back in bed in a moment.
Twilight heard the bed she had just fallen out of a moment ago creak, and Rainbow Dash appeared with her hooves poised on the edge of the mattress. Twilight noticed a splint tied to one of Rainbow's wings.
She's back,
Rainbow said.
See? I told you she'd be okay. Nothing to worry about.
Fluttershy glared at her.
I told you not to move around so much. You could make your wing worse.
When Fluttershy spoke, Spike embraced Twilight, and she weakly nuzzled him in return. Rainbow chuckled.
Oh, Flutters, don't sweat it. I only have one fracture left. You said it yourself. Back in bed,
Fluttershy ordered, her gaze intensifying, and Twilight focused on Spike to avoid even the periphery of Fluttershy's gaze.
All right. Yeesh,
Rainbow said, backing down immediately. Twilight heard the bed creak again, and the sound of hooves hitting a mattress.
No jumping on the beds,
Fluttershy said.
Ah,
Rainbow grunted.
fine.
Fluttershy paused awkwardly, her hoof still resting on Twilight's back.
Actually, could you help me get Twilight up?
A few minutes later, Twilight was back in bed, happily spooning hot, brothy soup into her mouth and munching on soft bread. While her muscles were weak, her magic remained strong enough for her to feed herself. While she ate, she read a note from Celestia that Spike had given her.
To my faithful student, Twilight Sparkle, I hope this finds you in good health. In our last correspondence, I was able to determine from your notes exactly what Hey Brittle had summoned. I knew that a sand ravager, a demonic beast that has not been seen in many long years, descended upon Appaloosa. You would need help to face it. So I sent Celestial Fury. I only wish I had been able to get the blade to you sooner. If I had, you might not be in such dire circumstances as I am writing this. Celestial Fury is blessed with great power, and it is a formidable tool for one capable of wielding it. From your last letter, despite what you believe yourself capable of, I knew you had the spark in your heart required to hold my sword. It will serve you well. Sincerely, Princess Celestia. P.S. I have instructed the keepers to give Spike access to materials in the library that details Celestial Fury's capabilities.
Twilight set the note aside with a small smile. Before, she had thought that the honesty of her last letter might have turned the goddess away from her. She glanced over at Rainbow Dash in the bed beside her.
So, why aren't you healed?
She asked.
Fluttershy got me mostly okay as soon as the fight was over, but she used a lot of her magic on you and Applejack. The town cleric and the buffalo have been running themselves ragged trying to help the wounded, and I'm a low priority since it's not like I'm gonna keel over if I don't get healed,
Rainbow explained.
It's been crazy boring for the past few hours, though, with every pony in the room being asleep.
Well, maybe you wouldn't be bored if you hadn't tried playing chicken with a rock and broke your wing in 3 places,
Applejack said as she stepped into the room, her coat glistening with rainwater.
I can see why they called you Rainbow Crash.
What? Hey!
Rainbow cried.
I saved your life, didn't I?
Applejack nodded.
That you did. Thank you.
She turned her eyes to Twilight.
I came as soon as I heard you were awake, Twilight. We were mighty worried.
What happened to me exactly?
Twilight asked.
I mean, I remember being pulled out of the river by Pinky, but everything after that is...
She paused, shaking her head to try and clear away the terrible memories of being torn apart.
Fuzzy.
She turned her gaze to Fluttershy.
I mean, I know I was poisoned, but why did you heal my leg if I wasn't going anywhere anyway? Didn't other ponies need the healing? You were convulsing, Twi. Like, a lot,
Rainbow said.
With the way y'all were spasming from the pain, it could have made your leg a lot worse,
Applejack added. Fluttershy nodded.
If I didn't heal you when I did, you would have never been able to use that leg again. At least not without being healed by very powerful magic,
She said, then added in a murmur.
if you even survived.
Twilight blinked at Fluttershy.
How bad was I? Very bad.
Fluttershy said.
The poison was... Well, even Wildhorn had never seen anything like it before. By last night, we thought you were going to die. Sooner or later, your heart wouldn't be able to keep up anymore and you'd stop breathing. Through the night, it was terrible. But then, this morning, 3 hours ago, it just stopped. You smiled peacefully, and you slept normally. You pulled through. It was a miracle. Celestia or Gaia or something must have intervened. For the record, I said you were going to be fine from the beginning,
Rainbow added.
I see,
Twilight said. She knew that she had crushed the Sand Ravager's infecting specter, not a god.
Maybe Celestia did empower me.
She considered.
Or maybe it was the same thing that saved me in the caves.
Pinky suddenly bounded through the door and onto her bed. Twilight barely managed to stabilize the tray of food while Pinky squeezed her in a loving hug.
Twilight!
Pinky cried. Twilight returned the hug despite Pinky's waterlogged fur and mane.
Thanks, Pinky. For everything.
She whispered in Pinky's ear. Pinky pulled away with a smile and raised her hoof.
Through eternity?
Twilight met the offered hoof with her own without a moment's hesitation.
Absolutely.
Twilight noticed Rarity standing beside Applejack. The white unicorn smiled softly at her.
Twilight, you are extraordinary,
She said.
Oh, and we found your swords in the river, both of them. They're downstairs.
Twilight returned to the smile.
Thanks.
Her thoughts then turned to Brayburn. If she was okay, the hardy Earth Pony must be too.
So, how's Brayburn?
She said. The room went silent. Twilight strode down the main street of Appaloosa through a light drizzle of rain with newfound strength in her limbs. Both of her swords menacingly floated in the air beside her. Citizens cleaning up the town in the aftermath of the battle fearfully cleared the way.
Twilight, stop!
She heard Applejack say somewhere behind her. She saw Wildhorn conversing with a pair of buffalo beneath a brass sun hanging above the door of a small wooden structure and advanced toward him with single-minded determination. Pinky rushed in front of her, blocking her path.
Twilight! Ah!
Twilight cast Pinky aside with her magic. Pinky tumbled in the mud, unhurt. With nothing left to impede her progress, Twilight trotted up to Wildhorn.
Rainbow brought Brayburn to you, to this house of healing, to be saved. And you betrayed him,
she shouted, brandishing her swords.
You were just waiting for the opportunity to weaken Appaloosa.
Calm, little shadow, Wildhorn said. We did all that we could. Twilight saw the fear in the eyes of the two buffalo beside him as she raised celestial fury. But instead of striking them down, she flung the blade above them. The sword impaled the brass sun, lodged in the metal up to its hilt. The sign swung wildly, the chain suspending it clinking.
Why?
Twilight screamed. She collapsed onto the steps at the entrance of the shrine as the strength left her limbs, Solstice clattering to the ground beside her.
Why him? Why him and not me?
Fluttershy was there at her side, soothingly stroking her mane.
Everyone did everything they could, Twilight. For both of you. None of us could stop the poison.
Twilight curled into Fluttershy, a familiar dull throb in her chest. In her mind's eye, she watched three foals grow up without the father they had known their entire lives. Twilight sat, still too weak to stand for long, in a wooden wheelchair on the eastern slope of the mesa. She watched Brayburn's coffin as its bearers, Applejack among them, lowered it into a grave. A cluster of gravestones surrounded them, marking the bodies of other Appaloosans buried there. The rain still drizzled calmly from the light gray clouds above. The voice of the town's cleric, Golden Delicious, filled Twilight's ears.
We commit the body of our friend Brayburn to the earth. His body will return to whence it came, but his spirit will soar. Celestia, in her infinite wisdom, will guide him to the heavens, where he may rest in eternal peace. One day, we will all join him, in a grand family beneath her pure wings. May Celestia watch over us all.
The funeral attendees echoed the sentiment. May Celestia watch over us all. As the cleric's voice faded, the sound of dirt hitting the coffin as the bearers filled in the grave replaced it. Twilight glanced at where Marigold stood in a black dress. Brayburn's widow looked down at the grave with tears in her eyes. Her children clustered around her hoofs. One of her fillies, the smallest, tugged at the hem of her dress.
Daddy's not coming back, is he?
She said. Marigold choked back a sob as she answered.
He's not coming back.
Twilight turned away, unable to bear watching the family any longer. She focused on the grave. As the bearers shoveled dirt, the rain stopped, and the dim shadows of the clouds gave way. The morning sun lit the eastern slope. The rays warmed her damp coat and illuminated Brayburn's gravestone. Here lies Brayburn, sheriff, husband, father, and friend. She would trade places with him in a heartbeat. If the Foals could have their father back, she would gladly be buried in a grave for the worms to eat. She wished that things had happened differently. She wished she had figured it out sooner and arrived in Appaloosa before Brayburn went out and got himself killed. But this was the way things were. No amount of wishing would change the fact that Brayburn was dead.
I'm not going to fail again,
she decided. Applejack wiped her brow, her head bare, and stood beside the gravestone, taking Golden Delicious's place.
I'm no Appaloosan, she began, but I wanted to say a few words. I've known Brayburn since we were both foals. He's always been strong and kind. I have fond memories of the friendship we had as children. And that friendship was still with us when I last came here to help y'all with building this town. I know that he believed in Appaloosa. And no matter how bad it got, he would have stuck with it.
Applejack paused before continuing, and Twilight could tell she was having trouble keeping her voice steady.
In the end, he died fighting to save this town. And I think if he had to go any way but peacefully in his sleep, he would have wanted to die for that purpose. His death was not in vain. We're still standing here, and the terrible beast that killed him is no more.
Applejack placed her hoof on Brayburn's gravestone.
There's no bond stronger than family, Brayburn. I won't forget you. We won't forget you,
she said, and then turned away. With her eyes on the ground, she stepped to join the crowd observing the funeral and placed her Stetson back on her head. Twilight pulled out the note she had received from Celestia as the next speaker stood at the head of the grave. She produced a stick of charcoal from a bag she had looped over the arm of her wheelchair and scribbled on the back of the parchment. She drew a few glares, but she ignored them. There were questions burning in her mind, and she believed she could get answers.
Is this true? There is no way to reach mortal souls after they are gone. Many powerful wizards and clerics have tried to find a way to resurrect lost loved ones, and all have failed. Though their bodies may be restored, their souls never return, and they remain dead. Do we really join you in the end? What happens when we die? What does death mean? Why am I still alive? And why is he dead? What am I?
She stared at the last question she had written. She had added it without thinking, and she considered striking it out, but in the end, she handed the paper to Spike as it was. He wordlessly incinerated it as quietly and courteously as he could. She didn't get a response until after the funeral was over. When Spike coughed up Celestia's reply, Twilight was sitting back in bed, toying morosely with another meal of soup. She knew she should be eating to keep her strength up, but she had no appetite. Her friends were all helping with the negotiations between the buffalo and the settlers, and she was left here alone, except for Spike. Spike had attempted to talk with her off and on to lift her spirits, but she had never given him much of a response when he tried. Eventually, he settled for sitting with her in silence, but he never left her side. When he finally produced the scroll, Twilight snatched it in her magic before he could catch it and hand it to her. It was the same note she had sent to Celestia, with new writing in ink beneath her scribbles. A small line separated the new writing from hers.
Is this true? There is no way to reach mortal souls after they are gone. Many powerful wizards and clerics have tried to find a way to resurrect lost loved ones, and all have failed. Though their bodies may be restored, their souls never return, and they remain dead.
True.
Do we really join you in the end? What happens when we die? What does death mean? Why am I still alive? And why is he dead? What am I?
Many attribute powers to me that I do not possess.
Some say that I have control over life and death as I do over day and night. Some say that I rule over the afterlife. Many blame me for things that are out of my control. I do not tell them they are wrong, because the beliefs they hold are far more comforting than the truth. The harsh truth, something that I share with very few ponies, and I hope that you are prepared to hear, is that death is meaningless. Before my sister and I killed the shadow, only the abyss awaited mortal souls upon their death. Now the shadow is but a corpse, and the abyss is closed. Instead of the abyss, nothing awaits those who die. An uncountable number of mortal souls, all those who have died since the shadow fell, exist in an eternal limbo. If I could help them, I would. But I have no power over the dead. They are beyond my reach. The answer to your question is, nothing happens when you die. There is no peace, no happiness, no family, no great adventure. Only nothingness. Death, as it stands, is an inevitable, terrible robbery of the gift of life. I must apologize, for I cannot give you all the answers, even though I wish I could. I cannot tell you why you lived and why he died. I only know that you, Twilight Sparkle, are extraordinary, and a destiny awaits you that few of us can imagine. Those blessed like you must fight a world of suffering and death, no matter how hopeless the battle may seem. For without you, there is no hope. See.
Her eyes scanned the page over and over in disbelief. She had always thought that Celestia watched over their spirits after they died, even though she had never gotten a straight answer from Star Swirl on the subject. With the stroke of a pen, Celestia had shattered her hope. She crushed the note into the smallest ball she could. Unfortunately, it didn't become a grain of sand and disappear like the scorpion in her mind. It was still there, reminding her of the cruel truth that Star Swirl was gone. Forever. Focusing her magic, she lit the paper with a simple spark. She watched as it slowly burned, suspended in her levitation. "I'm sorry, Twilight," Spike said, holding her. She gave him no response. She only stared at the flames in front of her.
I'm not blessed. I'm not a hero. I couldn't even save one pony.
Her friends returned with good news, but it did little to lift her spirits. Though the Appaloosans could tame the river's flow once more, they agreed never to block it again. Instead, they would work with the buffalo, combining their cultivation with the druid's knowledge and magic. Wildhorn predicted that together, they could grow more food with less water. That only left the problem of the mines. Fortunately, only the top layer of iron ore had been contaminated, and hopefully the Diamond Dogs would follow her orders and trade ore with the Appaloosans, who would have plenty of food to give in return. And even if the Sandcat somehow returned after being destroyed by Fluttershy's storm, the Appaloosan should have the funds to pay for more rain. As it was, the rain had swollen the river, and it quickly refilled its old channel, spilling down the canyon on its path to the sea once more. Over the rest of the day, well-wishers sent Twilight tokens of appreciation. Though they had destroyed the dam, she and her friends were hailed as heroes for killing the Sand Ravager, dealing with the buffalo, and solving the problem in the mines. Despite the Appalachians' hospitality, Twilight wanted to be on the road as soon as possible. Rarity had found the letter Haybrittle had kept in her bag of holding. Since it was undated and not written by Haybrittle, it had been lost in the bag when she retrieved the journal entries by date. It revealed the location of the Iron Circle's Ponyville safe house. While Twilight knew that the Black Knight was in Manhattan, Ponyville was on the way, and she needed as much information as she could get. However, she knew she needed rest before she could leave. Fluttershy said she needed at least 2 more days, but she hoped to be on the road in 1. She needed to find the Black Knight as soon as she could. Even though she couldn't blame Haybrittle's actions on him, or the actions of the Iron Circle as a whole, it was still his fault that Starswirl was gone, and that she was a killer. She was going to face him. While Starswirl was powerful, he had fought the Black Knight alone. But with the help of her friends, she had destroyed a nigh-invulnerable demon. She had faced death many times now, and survived. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. It was time for the hunter to become the hunted. Twilight Sparkle stood on a path. Shadowy trees loomed around her on both sides. Ahead, the path forked and bent away into the darkness. 5 lights floated at her side, comforting, ever present. The voice whispered behind her. "I'm still here." She turned. The shadow in her mind had shed the guise of the Black Knight. Before her, burning red eyes shone from the eye sockets of a unicorn skull. A body of shadows supported the skull, tall and imposing in stature, with wings that spread across the trail and connected with the dark trunks around her. Behind the specter, opposite the way she had chosen, was the straight road. Without fear, she addressed the darkness.
I made my choice.
A laugh spilled from its jawless mouth in an inky cloud. Let me show you where it leads. The ground slid past beneath her feet. The tree shot past her with incredible speed, turning as the path twisted and forked. In an instant, she stood next to the Black Knight in the center of a room. Around her, at the room's edges, were her friends, unconscious, dying. Shadows boiled from beneath his armor and spilled across the floor, engulfing her and her friends. It consumed them, but she was left untouched. Their bright, brilliant souls wisped from their mouths, lost forever. She shouted in denial.
This is but one ending. One path.
Its reply was quick. You cannot escape me no matter what you choose. I am at the end of every trail you may walk, long and short, hard and easy. I am nothing, and I will be everything. No matter where you run, no matter what you try, you will serve my will in the end. She would never bend.
I will not.
Fury rose from the shadows. I am not your enemy. I am you. You cannot deny me. One day, you will learn what you are, and that you will never escape me. She held her head high, faced forward and strode down the path she had chosen. A whisper behind her lingered. "Very well, but in time, you will learn." Twilight woke the next day feeling refreshed, despite her nightmares. By the end of the afternoon, she was ready to leave. They could travel to the bridge by night and exit the Badlands before the sun came up. That evening, she stood downstairs, and after clearing her cloak and solstice, she picked up Celestial Fury. In order to keep her mind off of what Celestia had told her while she was stuck resting in a bed, she had spent much of the time studying books from the Celestial Library, especially ones concerning the blade. It had many powers, beyond being sharp enough to cut diamond and never becoming dull. When it struck an enemy, it would hold them in a field of light for a time. While certain creatures could break free quickly, others would take longer to escape. The light would have the strongest effect on demons and the undead, though they could still overpower it. The blade also stored sunlight, which could be released in a burst that would vaporize creatures of darkness. When Celestia wielded it during the time of troubles, it earned the name God Killer. Few entities existed that it could not harm. Despite all that she had learned, she felt the books Celestia had allowed her to access left something out. Nothing she read told her about its origins or its history outside the time of troubles.
"Are you sure you're ready?"
Fluttershy said, sitting on the floor nearby. Twilight nodded.
Of course. I've been eating well, haven't I?
It was true. After she had refocused on her goal, her appetite had returned.
I don't mean to pester, but I'm worried about you. I'm not sure you're ready to travel.
Twilight finished securing Celestial Fury. The hilt protruded beside her head, and the sheathed blade rested diagonally across her back over top of her cloak. It was too long to rest comfortably at her side like Solstice.
I'm fine, okay?
Twilight said. In truth, her limbs were still a bit weak, but she knew she was strong enough to travel.
I can't stay here any longer,
she thought. With everything that lingered on her mind, the only way to escape was through action.
Are you?
Twilight stomped angrily, and Fluttershy stopped mid-sentence, cringing in response.
I'm fine,
Twilight shouted. She pulled on Celestial Fury with her levitation to ensure that the blade would draw smoothly. It did.
Okay,
Fluttershy murmured. Twilight glumly marched down the road to Ponyville. Exhaustion clung to her. After reaching the bridge, they had only slept for a few hours before the sun came up. But she pressed on, determined to reach Ponyville as soon as possible despite her lingering weakness. Rainbow Dash trotted effortlessly up beside her.
I'm going as fast as I can, Rainbow,
she muttered irritably.
Well, I didn't say anything,
Rainbow said.
You were going to. Well, yeah, but not about that. I wanted to talk about something. I wanted to apologize.
Twilight blinked at her.
For what? I failed. I ran away. If I hadn't, I might have been able to...
You're not the one who failed.
I did.
Twilight interrupted.
There was something in those notes that told Celestia what we were about to face. If I had noticed it, I could have cast a spell to protect us from the fear aura. Or I could have realized Appaloosa was going to be attacked sooner.
212 days. How did I miss that?
Applejack stepped up on her other side. It ain't easy to add days like that. Going by months makes it hard to tell just how many days ago a particular date was. I don't blame you, Twilight, or you, Rainbow. Without y'all, there would have been a lot more dead ponies. You did good. We all did. I know it don't make it hurt any less, but what happened ain't our fault. It was Hay Brittles, and he got his.
Rainbow sighed.
Yeah. I guess you're right, Applejack.
Twilight nodded, but she said nothing. She needed some pony to blame, and right now she was the last pony left.